science as cultural diplomacy. I believe that is important. I take it as a starting point of my argument. And then I argue that it can be effective and beneficial to all partners who are involved in this science diplomacy, but only if, or at least that it's important to take a sense of cosmopolitanism into account. So which is actually not commonly mentioned. That is, you look around cultural science diplomacy, which is a very hot topic, or at least in the past 5 years or so, 10 years or so, in part because President Obama in his administration, he started out trying to promote science as some kind of a diplomatic means or mechanisms that he hoped would get the world involved and so on, especially particularly the Muslim world and so on and so forth. So for a time, it became very important for many of these international relations issues and so on and so forth. The problem is that obviously the funding became an issue, and then therefore it became much less so commonly thought about. On the other hand, though, the idea is still there, and it still attracts a lot of attention from also the scientific organizations in this country as well as abroad. So I will argue that yes, it is important, and it can be effective, and it can be mutually beneficial. However, I would add one component which has not been commonly mentioned, it has to be a component of cosmopolitanism. And the second issue I would say is science diplomacy will work well only if it's done in the form of what I would call deep diplomacy. So it cannot be done just too superficially. Here's the image, it would be like a tree. If the roots goes deep, it goes wide too. Without that, it won't work very well. Okay, I'll use some examples to explain how and why. So here is an example, historical example. So science diplomacy is nothing new. It goes way back. Okay, here's an example in Chinese history, and the British Sino-British encounter would be in the late 18th century. So the British Empire tried to notch the Qing Empire, or if you want to call it the Chinese Empire, to notch it toward to open up more and more formal and commercial relations with the British Empire, right? So one of the things that they wanted to do is to send a formal diplomatic delegation to China. And they were thinking what to bring to the Chinese emperor at that time, or the Qing emperor at that time. And what they thought, you know what? We should bring scientific instruments, technology, examples of science and technology, to show that science and technology, we have achieved certain level of science and technology to impress them. Right, so the delegations came, huge boat, and they bought these beautiful instruments, and they brought it together with them, which you can see from here, that all these scientific instruments, you see these astronomical instruments and so on and so forth. They bought all this very gigantic thing, hard to impress. So they went there. Did it go well? No, it did not. The Chinese emperor or the Chinese court wasn't impressed. Okay, actually, Chinese had a whole collection of these instruments already in their warehouse, basically in the court palace. They have tons of them. So they weren't impressed with them. These are bigger, but you know what? There were several of them already there. Exactly the same. The hot air balloon and so on and so forth. They had seen them. Right? So this did not go well. So it would not be a good example of science diplomacy as a successful example. Here's a cartoon from the British kind of satirical cartoon. You can see that when the mission failed, they came home and within Britain itself, these cartoonists, they were drawing these political cartoons to kind of lampoon the whole mission, right? So you see all these hot air balloons, all these things, and so on and so forth, and then they had to bow to the Chinese emperor, didn't work well, and so on and so forth. So here, what I would come back to talk about how to make it work well, if use these kind of historical examples to show what will work, what will not work. So first of all, to say why science and technology, why science is considered to be a useful means for cultural diplomacy. And here's I would I would explain in following terms. That is, it represents, at least by now, very few people in the world, or very few countries, or various societies and cultures in the world would not see science as representing progress and modernity. So this is as much a symbolic thing. So when you think of science and technology, symbolically it represents modernity and progress. Okay, as much the symbolic meaning is as important as the material fact that it could perhaps increase the living standards and so on and so forth. Aside from that, it just a lot of nation states and so on. There's a longing or goal for pursuing science and technology because it in itself represents for many people science, progress and modernity, right? So the second attractive thing about science is that the ideas of science, I'm not talking about the reality of actually how science is done in the lab and so on and so forth, but the ideas, okay, there's some kind of, you could call it ideology if you want to, ideas of science, such as the kind of a general idea of science, such as science is objective, and it's disinterested, it's not partial, it's not, it has to be apolitical in the sense that you cannot just bring your personal interest into it. And its purpose is to truth seeking. You're looking for the truth. And it's built around some kind of a community, scientific community, as well as the humanity as a community. These are the ideas of science. So it's not necessarily true because I was a physicist before I became a historian. And I worked also in the biochemistry lab for some time. And I can tell you, based on personal experience, and that scientists were as mean as any other people. They're not, necessarily objective or disinterested and so on and so forth. They do a lot of backstabbing. They sometimes they're very arrogant. All the other things, science are humans too. Okay, but that's not the point. Okay, the point is that the ideas of science is thought to be like this and that. That is important in itself. It's that ideas play the role in history, and ideas play a role here too. That is, people often can agree upon science represents these ideas, and the people are willing, in a sense, to do it for these ideas. And the third thing is that we do have a lot of transnational global problems that really requires science diplomacy. We can't avoid it because a lot of these modern global transnational problems, whether it's diseases, pandemic, epidemic, locally or transnational, as well as environmental issues, global environmental issues. That's the kind of things I do. Tons of them that they have to be solved only when people can sit down in the same room and discuss it and then go out and carry things out. That's the only way you can do it because it's transnational. It's not confined within any national state boundaries. So here are some lessons of history that, let's see. The first example I give you is how I call it a failure example. That is, it didn't work. And why didn't it work? It was very superficial. It's not deep diplomacy, as I would argue. So the British Empire, when they came, the delegation, the idea is that to bring in some instruments, it looks very fancy and important, and that to demonstrate their technology and the scientific prowess. So they brought them over, and they want to impress the Chinese. The message didn't come across. It's very superficially done. They thought that might work, but there's no actual connections other than that one occasion they got a chance to see the Chinese emperor and the court and so on and so forth. It's not very deep and wide contact. So other examples that bring a lot of a mixed bag, some failures, some success, to some extent here and there. Other example would be, say, in the 1960s and the 70s, a lot of attempts at modernizing, at that time they called third world countries, but now we would say developing countries trying to develop. But the developing theories of the theory of development and modernization themselves are often very rigid and one-dimensional, teleological, that is only one type of a science and technology and the development and modernity in mind. So they work toward that. Forget about social cultural differences and so on. It seems to be only one type of modernity, right? In their view. And then they impose that upon over the world, and then you have results. Sometimes with luck, you get good results. Sometimes no, you don't get good results, right? So this is a kind of mixed bag. And then example would be the Green Revolution, which is indeed increased tremendous amount increase in agricultural product, right? Production is increased, and then that means that it helps the population solve some problems in the widespread hunger and so on and so forth. But you also have very serious environmental and social consequences. Like many of you are familiar with the consequences of the Green Revolution, that environmental deterioration because of a heavy use of fertilizers and the pesticides and so on and so forth. But also the social hierarchy enforced because certain people were more able to engage in this new kind of agriculture than others. So some people were pushed out of this system, and they become socially and economically even worse than before. So increase the social gap and so on and so forth. All these things that happen in different societies, right? So you have mixed bag results, some successes, some failures, and so on and so forth. And that compared to a more locally involved technology and science, what we call a peripheral technology, which is not so much in terms of a scale, not in terms of the kind of a center periphery ideas that people in the center think this will work and bring to the periphery, but more depends on the local environment kind of thing. Often actually work better, right? So and then that give us some kind of ideas about what might work, what might not work, and then you have example would be say in 1975, United States and the Soviet Union, it was at the height of a Cold War, that they were locked into this space race and arms race and so on and so forth. And they had some symbolic events such as the Apollo and the Soviet spaceship. They were supposed to be connected, so they connect in a space. So it's symbolic, like two high-tech spacecrafts. They were able to meet in the sky, outer space. So that's symbolic that space is open to all. So they believe that space is open to all. And it's for us to cooperate, and so on. It's a frontier of all humanity and all these ideas. And this is a height of Cold War, but it was so superficially done in the sense that it never really affects in any way the course of the Cold War. In the 80s, actually become a space, again, become the battlefield, right? You have kind of a Star Wars ideas during the Reagan era, and so on and so forth. So in a sense that these are so superficial, in a sense it didn't have the kind of a deep diplomacy I was talking about. So here I will argue it needs a sense of a cosmopolitanism to add to the sense of a scientific diplomacy, that is understanding as some kind of universalism. So here, first of all, let's kind of explore what is cosmopolitanism here, right? So that is that we have to acknowledge and recognize there are differences in different cultures and societies. And previously we talked about science as ideas, that ideas of science has universalism, has objectivism, and all these things. So in the sense that scientists themselves often think that there's only one way of doing things is science, right? So the right way or incorrect way or correct way, and so on and so forth. That, I think, is oversimplify things. So here we say that, well, let's start out by acknowledging that there are differences in society and the cultures, and that should be recognized. Okay, that should be respected too. Universalism, in this sense, that it doesn't mean uniformity. Okay, so it's not uniformism. That is, we don't require everybody to be uniform. Okay, universalism here is something is universal value. It doesn't mean that everybody should be uniform. These are two different things. Okay, we can explore that later, but these are two different things. And then the second thing I think is we should keep in mind with cosmopolitanism in mind, it would be adopt more kind of big tent view of the science technology. That it's not only one single type of science technology that must be done across cultures and societies and so on. Okay, cooperation means that you recognize that there are different approaches that can be done in different locations and the cultures and the societies, And if we're talking about in transnational exchange, communication, mutually interactive, then we're talking about there could be different ways of doing things, and they can communicate with each other, right? So it's what I would call a kind of big tent approach to science and technology. So recognize their local practices, local innovations that could be equally important than what, say, United States or high-tech countries, like leaders in science and technology, when they go to other places, if they don't recognize these differences, these local innovations, or they simply dismiss them, then often it's not going to work. The diplomacy won't go deep. And then another point is that we should recognize that modernities or modernity is not one single thing. There are modernities. In different societies and cultures, they might eventually go on different paths to their own modernities. So it's not only one single model that will carbon copy or cookie cutter, whatever model of modernity can apply to all societies and cultures. I don't think it will happen that way. I don't think it has happened that way. I don't think there's any evidence it's going to be that way. So therefore, cosmopolitanism, it has to be part of our idea about how science and technology can work as a diplomatic or cultural diplomacy. So here, two concluding points is that one, I will argue that I have to remind you in the sense that cosmopolitanism is different from relativism. I'm not saying that anything goes. I'm not saying that all theories of nature are equally valid or equally effective. That's not what I'm saying. That would be relativism. Right? I'm not saying that if you say, oh, there's a climate change, and I say there's no climate change, then we're equally fine. That doesn't wash, right? It's not that I say, it's one say evolutionary theory works, the other one say it doesn't work. It's not true. One say it's true, then does that mean that they are both equally valid? No, that's not what I'm saying. So there's a difference between relativism, which is that there's no kind of a criteria that can evaluate the validity of it or effectiveness of the two theories. That would be relativism. But what I'm saying is that yes, there are criteria. But on the other hand, though, there are different approaches to doing that. There are different approaches to doing that. And then each different approach might work for each different cultural society. And that should be recognized. Okay? And the second thing I would say that science and cosmopolitanism and only when they work together, science as diplomacy and cosmopolitanism, when they incorporate these two together and bring in the deep diplomacy, that is what we should be doing in terms of the general idea of science diplomacy. So in American Association for Advancement of Science is the main, they have a center of science diplomacy. And so they have been doing more conventionally the kind of science diplomacy they have been doing. And they have been doing it for a long time. During the Cold War, they did that with the Soviet Union, and then with China. That time, communists still in power during the Mao era. It's still in power today, but at that time was a very different situation. So they have some kind of scholarly committees to encourage exchange and so on. So the American Academy of Science, as well as AAAS, which is the Association for Advancement of Science, they've been doing this for many, many decades. But the reason I feel that they might not have done enough or might not have been paying enough attention is the sense of cosmopolitanism. That if they bring that into their program, I think that will help a lot in terms of how they will be able to achieve what the goal they set out to do. Right, thank you so much. That will be my presentation today.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have one or two questions or comments? As well as if you could raise your hand and briefly introduce yourself. But any questions or comments?
So any of you were involved in any science and technology related activities? But you're not here in the room when it's so hot and humid. So when you're with your own anything to do with science and technology or environment. That's interesting because I always think that science, technology, and environment, if you're not doing it, immediate change your what you're doing and trying to do science, technology, and the environment. I think that would be the medicine. These are really, I think, very important components of what international relations should be doing. So, when you think of it, what is most people on the street, and they would agree, they would say that science technology is important, right? So that's all of us have cell phones and so. So I'm actually surprised that it's not as a commonly done thing. So I think it's something that to keep in mind. To think of what is for our next 10 years and so on. It will be tremendously important.
See you in the back, please.
Oh yes.
Okay, I'm Martina from Cameroon. I'm working for the Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Yeah.
I will have only one question related to the transfer of technology when you go to China and
Okay.
from my experience in Cameroon, therefore I like that China has real hospitals,
Right.
our Congress hall, and sport
Oh, I see. So it's people coming.
or speak louder.
So you might want to speak a bit louder. Just the way people to sit down first. So.
You're making a good point.
Yes.
All right, someone is speaking, so you guys can.
Yeah.
Projector crossing.
Okay, I'll wait. So I was saying that China, in our relationship with China has built so many structures in Cameroon. Infrastructure. So because hospitals, our Congress hall, and
Roads.
roads, so many things. But you're talking about technology and science. Talking about helping countries to have such technologies, but the problem is that after you have done all this in countries, the problem is the maintenance of those infrastructures.
Right.
So whenever you want to build, you come with the Chinese building in countries. Why don't you take local people in order to build those infrastructures and let them share those technologies to be a complete transfer of technology so that you don't have to call you every time to help and maintain all this.
Right. That's exactly what I would say. Yeah, thank you so much for raising this question. And exactly what I would say in terms of you want the diplomacy to go deep, right? So use science and technology as means of diplomacy. That is to really bring the partners together. It has to be involve some kind of technology transfer. In this case, you have to involve local people. That's why I mentioned some kind of appropriate technology. That is that you work with the local people, and you don't do that, it becomes superficial, right? So simply you go there and you introduce hardware, and then they break down, and so on and so forth. There's nothing there to support the system. You have to train local people. You have to bring the local people to perhaps, so in this case, go to China to receive full training, and then go back there and so forth. So people should see long term, and I think a lot of these things is in part because of the Chinese government, and also a lot of it is the private enterprises. It's very hard to tell the differences here in this case. So in the sense that the communication between them wasn't going well. And I think the Chinese government should have a long-term idea about the thing instead of what they're doing, which is a lot more just going there and being short-term. So, yeah. But thank you so much, and I think this is a very important point of observation that should be really, yes.
I think science actually, a lot of the time refers to natural science. Actually, I think social sciences also can bring people together, form partnership to build a better platform to communicate.
Right.
I'm working in Hebei Academy of Social Sciences, and we actually get a lot of foreign friends. And office of the international office, the director,
Right.
he is very open-minded, and actually helped us recent years to establish very I think at least 20 universities and academics. We
Right.
get this partnership, And then each year, actually, we visit each other. Actually, in 2013, I visited the Indiana University, Purdue University
Right.
for Berlin, and I benefit a lot, half year. And this time I come here, actually, also financed by our academy. I think this is a really great platform, and social sciences also can bring people together. It
That's
is
a wonderful
culture.
point. Yeah, indeed. Especially, I would say, especially social science, because so a lot of it, psychology, for example, the history of psychology, how it developed. And when they really, I mean, they have all these psychological theories and so on and so forth. And then it's when these theories being challenged, and topological theories, is when a lot of the local people begin to participate in doing research. Then they find that all these assumptions about how human psychology work, originally was thinking it might be universal, or like there's a psychic unit that we all share, but then it turned out to be not necessarily the case. They're simply cultural traits and so on and so forth. So I would totally agree, social science has to be an important part of the enterprise.
Right, and also natural sciences can do much more thing to promote culture diplomacy,
Right.
especially, for example, climate problem. This issue, I think actually we need a lot of cooperation.
Right.
Chinese government put a lot of effort in recent years to reduce pollution.
Yeah.
Actually, they involved a lot of participation from foreign friends.
Right.
This is great, I think.
Yeah. I think it's something to be said about it is that the Chinese government does put in a lot of not only pollution but also green technology. They did put in a lot of money doing that, which doesn't mean that it's still very polluted. So
Much better.
much better. So it's a long way to go, but it is better. So yeah.
Professor Fan, unfortunately we're out of time, but I'd like to take this chance to please express our sincere gratitude once again to Professor Fan.
Thank you so much.
Very nice.